Well, good evening. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. David, thank you for your kind invitation. It's exciting that the God at Work course is planned here, and it's exciting that God has a place here in the city. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak this evening. Although I must say I am a little nervous. You'll appreciate that as a fund manager, my normal situation is safely behind two screens, not standing on a stage in front of a group of people. And in fact, last Thursday, I was down at a church called St Peter's Church. Don't say church and Chertsey too quickly, you'll get muddled up. But St Peter's Church in Chertsey, I told you. I would meet for a meeting with the haberdashers company, in fact. And one of the team there said, we were talking about this evening, he said, do you get nervous when you speak in public? And I said, well, yes, I do. But thankfully, in the car on the way down there, there'd been a program on Radio 4 all about public speaking. And there were some terrific tips about how to calm your nerves. And it concluded, take a swig of vodka and a couple of beta blockers. It'll be fine. I remember an incident one day, not long after I'd started work in the city, when a young city worker who clearly got his first bonus pulled up his brand new silver Porsche alongside the pavement on Cheapside, wanting to show it off to his colleagues and friends. He opened the door just as a big lorry came past and took the door off. The guy called the City of London police, screaming blue murder. The police arrived moments later. Understandably, he was crying, my Porsche, my beautiful silver Porsche. It'll never be the same again. When the man finished his rant, the city policeman looked at him in disgust and said, I can't believe you lot. Is there nothing else in life other than material things? Do you not value any other part of your life? The city policeman said, how can you say such a thing? The Porsche owner said, how can you say such a thing? The policeman said, well, didn't you realize your right arm has been taken off at the same time? The city worker looked down and screamed, where's my Rolex? What makes you happy? I wonder, what makes you happy? And you're not supposed to answer a swig of vodka. I wonder what your answer would be if you were in a job interview and that was the question. That's what happened to me when I was looking for a job in the autumn of 1993, just down the road. As the words came out of the interviewer's mouth, time stood still. I knew the answer to the question, what is the reason for your joy, is Jesus Christ. And that was the question I wanted to answer and the answer I wanted to give. But was that the question that was being asked? Could I wriggle out of acknowledging the voice, recognizing the question I wanted to answer? Could I overcome the thumping heart, knowing and recognizing that question? Should I give the textbook answer, a good cross-court winner on a Monday night tennis match? Well, I did answer Jesus Christ, and time stood still. And in that moment, I knew it was the binary outcome of binary outcomes. Either I'd got the job or I'd completely blown it. But I wanted to, in that moment, just reach and stretch and put a signpost in the ground for truth. I wanted the interviewers to know the truth of the person that they were potentially recruiting. And I too wanted to put a sign for truth in the ground that would help me later in harder, more difficult decisions and circumstances. Now, one of the interviewers looked at me completely blankly, didn't have a clue what he was thinking. The other, who it turned out was the largest shareholder, was also a Christian. And so I understood that to be a signpost. And we sometimes get that sense of signposts, don't we? We sometimes get a glimpse of them. We sometimes read them. But we don't always see them in all their glory. We don't always see them all joined up as God would see them in eternity. But they're there. We have a loving Heavenly Father who wants to guide us. So let's, with faith, see them. Let's read them, follow them, as we seek to follow and love God at work. And so it was that I started my career in finance here in the City of London. And I must say, I've been incredibly blessed by the Lord. I've been part of a business that has grown pretty consistently over 20 years. We've avoided the worst pitfalls of the Asian crisis, the dot-com bubble bursting, the credit crunch, the financial crisis, and worst of all, the regulator. I've developed one of the top-performing teams in the company, sat on the board of the operating company, and the management committee for the last 12 years or so. And I hope and pray that in that time, I've been able to be salt and light in the business. It's taken different forms at different times. I remember one of the early signposts I had after I'd been there a year or two. A great friend and spiritual mentor of mine encouraged me to meet in the morning before work with a small group of other guys, to pray together, to have breakfast, to have a coffee, to walk and do life together. We did that for a number of years, and it was a great encouragement. There was another signpost a few years later when, after I'd attended a church leadership conference, I was encouraged and inspired to set up a weekly lunchtime internal meeting that I called Time to Reflect. I sent out an email to everybody in the London office inviting them to that time. I touched base with the chief exec and said, "Are you happy if I do this?" And he was delighted. He said, "Go for it." Slightly nerve-wracking when you've written the email and you press send to everybody in the business inviting them. But I felt it was important to do that. Work can be so pressurized, and that time to reflect, I wanted to give people, my colleagues, an opportunity to come to an oasis and just have a bit of time out where we could spend an hour together. And I wanted it to be open to everybody, not just those that believed in Jesus, but anyone who wanted to come into that caring environment where we could point towards Jesus. And then more recently, after a men's weekend away, there's another signpost, this time to encourage people in the office to attend local lunchtime events of other Christians in the immediate vicinity. Each of those was a signpost. And whilst in some ways I was a catalyst or leader or coordinator, I'm sure none of them really surprise you as suggestions of things that any of us could do in our offices or workplaces. And I'll give you a tip as well. It's much easier to be an initiator of these things because you can set the time, you can set the agenda, you can set where it's going to meet to fit in with your diary rather than having to come along to someone else's. But I'd also like to look at how we might integrate our desire to follow Jesus, to be salt and light in the workplace. And as David said, it's a question I wrestled with after the credit crunch. I spent a bit of time out reflecting, reading, and praying about what it means to be a Christian in the workplace and what a Christian's approach to work might be. Now, I work in investment management, and as such, I see my role to be that of a fiduciary for our clients, meaning a legal or ethical relationship of trust between two or more parties. Typically, a fiduciary prudently takes care of money for another person. Now, if you hold shares, you're an owner or a part owner of a business, of a company. And as such, I think the Bible encourages us to take responsibility for the shares, for the companies that we own. And extending the logic of that, we ought to be engaging actively in the voting of the resolutions that come out of companies at AGMs and EGMs. With that, I created a new corporate governance committee at Rathbones. We had for a number of years voted on EGMs and AGMs for companies, but we just voted blindly in favour of management 99% of the time. And I thought we needed to do more than that. We needed to engage with the companies whose shares we held on behalf of clients. We needed to have a view around these resolutions, whether they were good things or bad things, whether they were appropriate for the running of good business. We engaged external consultants who said that, in their opinion, we were the first of the private client investment management companies that were taking our engagement to that level. And in doing that, I believe that we shone a little more of God's meaning and purpose into the world of finance and the world of work. There's a lovely footnote as well to that story, which is one of my colleagues who was probably the biggest objector to the creation of the committee. He joined the committee and 2 years ago succeeded me as chairman of that committee. And it continues to grow in strength and influence in the company, and we're currently in the process of recruiting specialist people to staff it. As well, in the world of investment management, the question of ethical investing comes up. What is ethical investing? Do you do ethical investing? How do you do ethical investing? And of course, whose ethics are they anyway? I was reflecting on this the other day, and I'm sure we've all thought for at least a moment about environmental ethical debates. But what about the people that choose to exclude tobacco and alcohol and armaments from their portfolios? I wonder whether there's more to it than just sitting in judgment on those sectors of industry and commerce. Perhaps it's about how we influence the culture of the business that we're sitting in, how it goes about what it does. The creation of the Corporate Governance Committee and the use of the independent CSR consultants was, as far as I'm aware, a first. But let's too remember, as we sit in our workplaces, common grace. That is, mankind made in God's image, and that there is good stuff going on in the businesses in which we work. Let's see those work practices, those good work practices that we may not have originated, as signposts of God's common grace. Let's cheer them on. Let's support them. Let's bless them. Let's see them prosper and fly. A couple of examples from Rathbones. We've taken the view in the past that clients have come to us and paid us to invest their money. We want to invest that money as cheaply and as efficiently as we possibly can. So we adopted the principle years ago of only buying what are called institutional funds, which are cheaper funds than those available in the retail marketplace. The ones in the retail marketplace often had a trail fee attached to them. We did away with that because our job was to access the market as cheaply and efficiently as possible. Now, those that are aware of the marketplace will understand that 2 years ago the Retail Distribution Review came in, which brought the whole industry in line with our practices. Similarly, in terms of global investment performance, the investment performance numbers around portfolios, sometimes people are cynical and skeptical about how the performance numbers are calculated, whether portfolios are cherry-picked. Well, we've, for a number of years, calculated our numbers according to the Global Investment Performance Standard, which, as far as we're aware, is the highest standard of portfolio performance crunching that you can do. And we've had our numbers audited by Ernst & Young. Neither of those are things that I have initiated, but I think they're part of that common grace, good things that are going on in our business, and I'm sure there are equivalents in your business. In addition to work life in the office, I think there's more to life than just the office, and I'd like to be involved in things outside the office, as David has touched on. And about 10 years ago, I was elected as a Common Councilman for the ward of Farringdon Within, a member of the City of London Corporation's Common Council, which is the local authority for the city, and the Lord Mayor is the head of the council. During that time, I chaired the Investment Committee, was a member of the Policy and Resources Committee, which is the closest the city has to a cabinet, and had the privilege to chair one of the state banquets at Guildhall. Now, the motto of the City of London is Domine dirige nos, and as any classical scholars here would tell us, or anyone who's reasonably well informed, Domine dirige nos means Lord direct us, or Lord guide us. Stop and think for a moment how great and exciting that is, that all around us here in the city, the signs that mark the entrances to the city, the signs that point the way within the city, carved into the buildings all around us, are the words, Lord guide us. They're the words that start every Common Council meeting as well. It's not just that the Common Council and the City of London Corporation that has that woven into its fabric. The signs are also there amongst the 100-odd livery companies that exist in the city. About a third of them have mottos that speak clearly of God. The Drapers' Company say, "Unto God only be honour and glory." The Fishmongers' Company says, all worship be to God only. Another third of them are slightly more what I call God-honouring puns. The Glaziers, and you need to think about this for a moment, "O God, give us your light." And the newspaper makers, "The word of the Lord endures forever." These and many other mottos are located all around us here in the city and are daily signposts for us to have our lives focused and centred and directed by him. So let's encourage one another. Let's encourage one another to have our eyes and ears open and focused on him, to the signs that he gives to each of us. Now, I guess one way or other you have, because you're here tonight. There's been a signpost, there's been an invitation, there's been a prompt, and you're here, and that's great. Now, I'm no lawyer, although I'm married to one, and my sister is one, and my cousin is one. And so I appreciate that usually arguments have two sides. And it may be that there's some times when we don't see the signposts, we don't act on them, or we decide that we disagree with them, and we decide to go our own way. Indeed, reflecting back on my journey, I can see times when, despite setting off with good God-honouring intentions, I have taken the wrong route. I have taken my own way rather than follow him. I don't know if you're the same as me, but in the past, I know there's been times when I've succumbed to the temptation of listening to the world's siren call of success and placing that before Jesus. Sometimes the dark side of success is there. At the extreme, perhaps we find ourselves listening to whispers in our heads telling us that we're brilliant, that we're a master of the universe, that we're the biggest hitter in our team, our department, our company. Or perhaps we compare ourselves with others who we perceive as lazy, people who we perceive as not pulling their weight, and in so doing we become judgmental. Either way, and a whole host of others probably, we self-justify the direction that we're taking away from God. I used to be in the army in pre-GPS or sat-nav days, and so map reading was a real skill, a key skill. People often got lost, though, because they tried to falsely relate the ground to the map, rather than trust the map to accurately reflect the ground. And I found myself in that position a couple of years ago. Such had been my blindness to the insidious creep of ambition and success. Rathbones, like a lot of city firms and professional services firms, has the successful investment managers drawn into the management of the business. And that was the place that I found myself in. I tried hard to simultaneously develop a successful investment career and climb the greasy pole of management. But I found in my heart there's a real tension between the two. I couldn't give up either. I wanted to keep pushing on with both. And I went round and round in circles, oblivious to the signs, in fact, for 3 or 4 years of this growing tension in my heart and mind. I became ever more confused and wound up as I tried to answer the question, Lord, do you want me to do investment, or Lord, do you want me to do management? I feared, to be honest, giving either up because of the status, the power, the money, the influence. I'd succumbed to the idealization of success. I was seeking maximum success in both areas simultaneously and couldn't give either up, despite the signposts and despite the promptings. Thankfully, around that time, I read a book by Tim Keller called Counterfeit Gods. It deals with money, sex, and power, but it unpacks those as well and goes down a layer, and it identifies success as also a god that one can succumb to. I was taken very low by that revelation, but helped come out of it in many ways by God at Work that we've heard Ken Costa wrote. And when I read it, I realized that the problem I had was this debate about investment or management. Was it investment or management? Was it investment or management? Was it investment or management? It's boring after 3 times, let alone 3 years, but that was what I'd done. I'd just gone around for 3 years asking that question. Of course, the question I should have been asking, and it dawned on me one day, was not investment or management, but it was work or Jesus. Which did I want to focus on, work or Jesus? And I thank God that there was that revelation, that moment of insight, that the question I should be asking was work or Jesus, not investment or management. My identity and your identity is in Christ. And he makes us free from the shackles of idols. We can grow in our awareness that we are children of God and we're loved unconditionally. None of what I can do, none of what you can do, whether it's the best investment performance, whether it's the position on the board, is going to lead God to love us anymore. We are loved unconditionally where we are, who we are. And equally, nothing we do will lead him to love us, me, any less. We've been called to serve God in our places of work. It's a high purpose and calling if we're doing what we do in order to please him and honor him. Many people waste their lives. They've no purpose or meaning or goal. Other people do have a goal, but it's the wrong goal. They end up following meaningless signposts. Many reach the top of the ladder of success only to find it's against the wrong wall. Purpose is far more important than property or possessions. Having more to live with is no substitute to having more to live for. So I'm sure you'll understand how important it is that we are on a firm foundation. How do we ensure we see those signposts? One of the greatest blessings I had was that time in a small group of 4 or 5 other guys meeting before work for an hour or so. Little did I realize how valuable that time would be until I found myself without a group like that about 5 years ago, which was precisely the time I found myself in the greatest period of uncertainty and flux in my professional career. Life without fellowship, without brothers and sisters in Christ, with whom you can do life, the counsel of the saints, prayer partners, becomes a very dangerous place. Satan is prowling around to devour the calf on the edge of the herd. What good is it if we, in our pursuit of career, gain the whole world, lose our soul? Don't sacrifice your family for your career. If you do, you'll end up winning the admiration of those who don't matter and losing the love of those who do. Let me just read a passage from this book. Well, I'll plagiarize it, actually. As a fund manager in the City of London, I have read the Financial Times and Bible almost every day for the last 22 years. People often ask how I reconcile working in finance and being a Christian. There is a widespread view that God and business simply don't mix. The competitive, cutthroat demands of the marketplace are seen as the obvious enemy of Christian compassion and love. But I have found the God who created and sustains the world is also the God of the workplace. If the Christian faith is not relevant in the workplace, it is not relevant at all. I read this book not long after it first came out, and it was instrumental in helping me when I was spinning around in confusion of competing demands at work. It's full of good, common sense, spiritually grounded advice. And so I would encourage you to read it if you've not read it, to look out for a course that might be coming where you can discuss it with others, inspire one another to see signs, act on them in faith and love for Jesus, and so to be the man or the woman that God has called you to be, and walk confidently the path, trusting him for his glory. Amen.